This is Morning Reel, a 3 to 4 to 100 minute or so podcast of films that I review. If I see it, I review it. Hosted by yours truly, Ray Salazar. Listen, I've never owned an iPhone ever, 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 ever. The closest thing I owned to an Apple product was an iPod that lasted till I don't know, man, 2006, and then that was it. Once that iPod was gone, that was it. There was no way of me getting another one because I think I got it for free or something like that. Either way, man, I saw this film called Steve Jobs. It's a 2015 biographical drama film directed by Danny Boyle. If you know who Danny Boyle is, he's directed a lot of good films such as Trainspotting and the Academy Award winning film Slumdog Millionaire. Screenplay written by Aaron Sorkin, who's a genius writer, man. I mean, if you know about Aaron Sorkin, he writes pretty intense, semi-tech, semi-political dramas, like period pieces, and it's usually modern. I like to say almost that Aaron Sorkin's almost a neo-noir type of writer, man. Like, it's not exactly all the way to the tech, but the drama's there. Either way, this is adapted from a 2011 biography by Walter Isaacson, and there was interviews that were actually conducted by Aaron Sorkin to pretty much set up the whole treatment of the film. Now, I've seen this film maybe like 3 times already in my life. It's not that old, but it's pretty old enough to revisit it and to actually talk about it, man. Like, this is a film about a man who pretty much saw the future in the garage with his homie Steve Wozniak, who was actually played very, very well by Seth Rogen, man. Yeah, Seth Rogen's hilarious and all that stuff with, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and all those other films. But this man does have a lot to offer in the dramatic side of things, Steve Wozniak was basically the Ringo Starr of the Beatles. Nah, actually, no, he was not Ringo, as he would claim. He was Paul, dude. He was Paul, and Steve Jobs was John. And you can't have Paul without John and John without Paul, as you can see by the Beatles, right? And this guy pretty much invented the computer. This guy was behind it all. He built the circuit board. He built the things that you would plug into the actual computer itself. And there was differences into those two people. Wozniak really wanted something that people can easily access to, and Steve Jobs was like, fuck that shit, bro. I don't want no third-party hands digging into my fucking products, man. That's not what it's all about. Which, for any entrepreneur or for any businessman or just like any inventor, you want to have that absolute control of your product, of your baby. And these two had a baby together, and there's differences, but they don't forget that they're brothers at the end of the day. Not actual brothers, but they're brothers in arms. They basically invented the future, and it's they knew certain points of it, but there was just so much more that they couldn't fathom of thinking, like iPads, power books, things of that nature, cell phones, things that people could have at the home, and that was the ultimate goal between these two people, that they knew that they wanted something that was mobile. They wanted something that people could not have to get out of the house. And look at us right now when you compare the early 70s to 2024 going on 2025, where everything's in the palm of our fucking hands. It's literally right now as I'm holding this mic, the other hand is holding my phone. And it's not an iPhone, but it's because of the Mac, dude. It's because of the Apple II, the Apple Lisa, the Macintosh that pretty much set everything forward. Who would have thought that a window with round corners would be a fucking big ass deal? Who would have thought that turning on the computer and having the computer actually make a human like sound? Who would have thought something like that could ever happen? And the film's not really much about the computer, it's about the man behind the computer, but the man and the computer are almost like one being itself. Steve Jobs, he's a guy who always likes to be in control. He's very indifferent about people and about people's feelings. He hates to acknowledge the fact that he's actually a father to a kid, which had to take a paternity test, and the paternity test told him that, hey, you are 94.3% the father. And he's like, nah, But dude, you pay for the fucking test and they show you the results and you're still saying that? He's like, nah. Steve Jobs had a vision, man, and honestly, a child was not in that fucking vision. But let's not forget, he named the first computer after Lisa, which is his daughter. And there's a pretty key scene in this film where his ex baby mom and his kids there, and the Macintosh is right there sitting on the table, and Lisa's playing with it, and Steve doesn't really care about what she's doing really, but he did notice something. He noticed that kid was focused. That kid was drawn to this machine that even at that time was like, it's like seeing the television for the first time ever, but with capabilities, right? And he knew there was something there as soon as he saw Lisa making something on Mac Paint, which, as you can probably kind of tell, that ended up being the G3 Mac that everybody loves, everybody owns at one point, with many different colors. Like, nobody saw that coming, but he did, especially at that moment. Even we didn't see it in the audience. Now, Danny Boyle was pretty good at directing this film because he took 3 key points of Steve Jobs' life and the people who support basically the bloodline of Apple, the bloodline of the Macintosh computer invention itself. And it's very tense, it's very dramatic. There's politics in it, not like worldwide politics. I mean, that always plays into question, right? But like politics within like the company, like Steve was like a maverick, dude. Like, he didn't listen to anybody. He's kind of like Elon Musk, like he just listened to himself. He knew what he was up to. He just needed a team, and that was it. He just needed a team, and he told the team what to do. And honestly, the team did what he wanted to do. And eventually it worked out. It wasn't a success overnight. It wasn't a success in 10 years. It took him like almost 30 years to pretty much nail it with that 90s launch towards the end of the third act, which is, honestly, it's a really good third act because everything pays off. All the characters tie in their problems between each other, especially Steve Jobs. And it's kind of crazy to see an older Steve Jobs, much more wiser, much more smart, really, about himself and about how people treat him and how he treats people. Because if you're inventing something or making something that for sure is going to actually benefit mankind, for the next like lifetime. Even Steve Jobs knew that the people who are purchasing these Mac computers, these PowerBooks, these iPads, these iPods, iPhones, and all that crap, man, it was going to lead to one thing: access to the internet, access to worldwide shit. And it's pretty ironic because like he invented something that's pretty end to end, where like, let's say I have an iPhone. Let's say life was programmed by iPhones, right? Everybody had an iPhone, and then there was this one Android guy. That Android guy would have no communication towards anybody else except pretty much himself. But what's hilarious in like, when you think about it in the long run, he invented something that people were gonna like basically jailbreak it either way. People were gonna pretty much go out of their way to like communicate with others. There was no way that you could really hold on to something that like it's just bound to be accessible by everybody. So like, why deprive yourself from it? It's just gonna make you more money at the end of the day, and it's gonna make you look like a tech god, which he kind of was, man. Like, towards the end of the film, where he tells Lisa like, hey, I'm gonna put music in that little pocket or whatever like that, right? Basically saying like, I'm inventing this thing called, quote unquote, an iPod or whatever, because he was tired of seeing his daughter carry that big gigantic late 80s Walkman. I don't know, it's just those things that like, I guess a guy like him just thought about it, and he's like, you know what, like there's something that we could do to fit in the size of your hand or whatever, and the cinematography is pretty good too. I don't know, Danny Boyle is kind of weird with those like arch type of angles, it kind of works what he was doing with this film in particular. I like how he shows people in masses, because that's what the whole film was about, like feeding into the masses and acquiring from the masses at the same time, and you see all these people who are, and it's not even that, it's like a building's worth of people, but we all know that like there was millions and millions who wanted to see that launch, who wanted to be physically present for something like that, because people kind of knew at that point, man, like this guy like pretty much made history about making a pretty, what at that time was a badass innovative machine that actually was affordable, that every school, public, private, whatever, can actually afford to supply it to people, or to people who are underprivileged. Like, say you can say about how much of a dick he was to his own family or to the people who worked very closely with him. I don't know, man. It's like that Michael Jordan thing where like he wanted everybody to be at the top of their game because that was the only thing you could do. Like, there's no other way around it. Like if you want to be the best, you got to be the best no matter what. I'm the best, you guys got to be the best, because if you're not the best, there's nothing I can do with you. And he kind of saw things like that, not to that grand of a scale, but the way that film depicted this version of Steve Jobs, like he was just about fucking business because he just knew what he was doing. He saw the future. It's some weird Nostradamus shit, and you can kind of call it cornball. I don't know, man. I do like the intensity, and I like the intensity between all the characters who would converse with him, converse about him. Those people were key to his success, really. There wouldn't be a Steve Jobs without Steve Wozniak or Joanna Hoffman or Andy Hertzberg and all those little players, like they just got it going. And Danny Boyle did a pretty good job depicting a film that pretty much makes you think about how, like, fuck, man, like it took all of this, it took these type of events to pretty much kind of like make something like a Macintosh happen or an iMac happen, period. And when you think about it, it's a very important event in our human history. Like, this guy like invented something that we still use today, and like it's gonna get far more better, scarier, accessible, and just greater in its advancement in technology, man. And it's a pretty good biographical film too, because it really doesn't miss as to how you could really relate to this person, because at the end of the day, he is a relatable person. Like he did grow up without parents. His parents basically threw him away. It's kind of crazy how he would like talk about it, and you can tell that it was something that was very hard for him to talk about, which kind of led to kind of who he is or who he was as a person, especially to his own family, to his own baby mom, his own daughter. Like there's a key line that he says towards the end of the film, really, where he says, I'm poorly made. And that shit hits, man, because it pretty much does take a big man or a big person to kind of have that accountability about who you are and how you treat folks. And not that you could just like blame it on your parents or whatever, but like it's a first step to all kinds of things, right? Which the Apple computer was the first step to what we have now, man. Especially the shit that I'm talking right now on this microphone. Follow me on Morning Shot Films, IG and YouTube. I give this film a 3.5 out of 4 tokes. Really because of some of the corniness between the dialogue and like this Steve Jobs version is you can tell he's very full of himself. I can't really say I'm not fully convinced that this guy was really like that. Like godly, like, where like it's my way or the highway to the T, But either or, man, Aaron Sorkin's a really good screenwriter, man. He got me hooked in the first 12 minutes. It's films like this that kind of make you think about like what you want out of life, or what you want to put into society, what you want to introduce to the world. Not just necessarily the world, but like your own world, your peers, because that's a good start out of anything else. Check out my website, morningshotfilms.co, and on to the next one.